Namaste. Today, I welcome you all to another one session with Dr. Chaitanya Giri. He has actually written two very interesting articles in Swarajya, particularly about the Chinese-Russian joint venture creating an international space station, and also about sending spacecrafts that would bring back material from outer space, lunar soil samples or comet soil samples, etc. So today we are going to have a very interesting interaction with Dr. Chaitanya Giri about his views on these aspects and where India stands in all this. So let us go to Dr. Chaitanya Giri. Namaste and welcome.
Namaste, Arvindaji. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Chaitanya Giri, usually your articles illuminate the mind and expands the horizon and makes you feel very good about the kind of achievements that are happening in the space technology. But this time, these two articles that you have written, they are a bit depressing in the sense you point out that we are losing out in the space race actually, and that a very big event is happening, as you have put it very beautifully, that there is this space colonization that is happening, and there is a politics in space colonization, and India is nowhere to be seen. Can you please elaborate on this particular aspect?
Sure, Arvindaji. The times that we are living in right now are very important. This COVID-19 pandemic has hit us the second time in a excruciating way. And nobody 2 years ago, or most likely more than that, had ever imagined that the entire world will be crippled by an event like this. Some last year, when the pandemic hit the world, started calling it as a black swan event. And later on, that term was not used as frequently as it was in the initial months, but it continues to be a black swan event. So, in a world where full fledged wars cannot happen because there are checks and balances put in place after the Second World War, uh, events like these play the role of rearrangement or restabilizing, and they are initiated by countries who are capable of unleashing such forces. I won't go in detail there, but people will understand what I am hinting at. Similarly, my intent of writing these two articles was only to put out that let's not be complacent about certain sectors, because the way the world, including India, has been crippled by this virus, which for a very long time has been a subject of study of only scientists. And within that scientific group, only a small group that are known as virologists. Virologists were not these important ever before. Likewise, a threat may come out from outer space. It may not be a kinetic threat. It may not be a threat of an asteroid or a comet hitting the Earth and obliterating all life on it. The threat is economic in nature. That if we do not advance or expand the nuances within our space program at a pace that is necessary, we might be left behind. Now, the two articles that you spoke of, the first was about the getting together of China and Russia. Now, in an Asia where we often come across the fact that if we look Asia on a map, between Israel and India, there is no democratic country. Between India and in the Far East, Japan or Taiwan, again, there is no democratic country per se. There are forces which inhibit democracies. Now, in such a situation, if the two largest geographies on this continent, if they join hands on something as meta strategic as setting up bases on the moon, it should sound alarm. Why I say that is because after the end of the Cold War, the Russians found themselves becoming amenable to the West. They joined hands in the early 1990s to form the International Space Station. And over the years, prog- projects like International Space Station have played a stellar role in curbing down the tension that existed during the Cold War. But in the past few years, since the United States again got its mojo back, and by mojo I mean that uh, after the retirement of the space shuttle, Americans were dependent on Russian heavy rockets, heavy launch vehicles, for supplying logistics as well as transporting crew to the International Space Station and bringing them back. Russia was important then. Russian rockets at that point in time, especially rocket engines like R8, RD-180, were being used by American companies like United Launch Alliance. But since the advent of SpaceX, America has got its mojo back, and it is now trying to, if not sever ties, but stay away from Russia. Now, this uh, loosening of collaboration is pushing Russia to either go alone or go with the Chinese. And if we look at the progress of the Chinese space program in the past 20, 25 years, it's marvelous. We should commend them. 2003 was their first human space flight. That was the same year when Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Prime Minister Vajpayee, announced Chandrayaan. They had gone into space. They had sent their taikonauts into space. Today, as we talk, their modular space station, the Chinese large modular space station, is hovering around in the skies. It was launched just today, a few minutes ago. And Russia identifies this new Chinese province. It finds valuable to join hands with China. And what does that mean? Now, there is a clear distinction with two so called communist countries coming together, powerful enough, as well as America, which is trying to form its own uh, partnership with smaller democratic countries, or not all of them are democratic countries, but smaller partners which with whom they are pooling financial resources, pooling technical resources, pooling human resources. China and Russia will do the same. As they collaborate, the two will pool all these three. And what will happen eventually is uh, a titanic Cold War once again resurfacing on the face of this planet. And this time, the Cold War, the space race, will not be to reach somewhere first. The space race would be to occupy the largest pie in the cake that is known as the space economy. So, space exploration is not entirely scientific anymore. Yes, science remains the undercurrent. R&D remains the undercurrent of space exploration. But the motive is not science. The motive right now is economic.
Now, when in your article you have talked about the two blocks that you just now spoke about, and the question is why India is not part of, obviously, it cannot be part of the Chinese alignment because naturally we have territorial disputes and we have different value system. But why India is not part of the US alignment? Why India has been left out? Is it because of our own NAM tendencies lingering still, or is it because the US purposefully doesn't want India to be part?
Uh, One cannot be entirely clear because this is something an insider would know, and that person might not tell us why this has been the case. But my conjecture is that India has, after the NAM subsided, we developed a certain notion known as strategic autonomy. And as part of that notion, we always felt that we should not align with any of these two blocks. We can interact with each of them independently. And we do that very successfully. So if we look at our current space program, uh, our meteorology, our planetary exploration, especially Chandrayaan, both the Chandrayans as well as Mars orbiter, are very well in tune with the West. Whereas we have joined hands with Russia for human spaceflight. Likewise, there are other smaller countries in Europe that are fairly autonomous, especially with France. We share very good relations, strategic relations. Then Germany to a certain extent, Japan to a certain extent, Israel, again, in a very limited defense sector. But none of these relations that we have give us the ability to pool in resources. Now, space exploration or any space activities, if it does not generate economic returns, it will always be seen as uh, a futile project. It has to generate some economic value out of it. And this has been the very reason why in the 90s or in the 2000s, we always saw socialist mindsets in this country flagellating that, hey, India shouldn't be investing in outer space activities. We are a poor country. Focus on building toilets. And that became a priority. So we were pushed into a rabbit hole, and that rabbit hole was always, you know, percolating these thoughts into our mind that, look, space is not for us, space is not for us, space is not for us. We somehow got over it during the Vajpayee era, during the NDA era, when we took that next step. Because by that time, PSLV also had got space proven status. But then again, we were only left to soft diplomacy. We never pooled in the resources. We were never ready to pool in resources with any of these two blocks. Okay, fair enough. But did we try to create our own block? We never did that because there is still a strategic fear, if I may say so, that both these will pounce on us. Now, if we look at the hierarchy in terms of space power, it's a very rudimentary thing that I'm saying, but I think the audience will understand. We put United States as at the top of the echelon. It's the supreme power in outer space. It maintains total supremacy. Below that, there are two other powers, but they have their own Achilles heels, and these are Russia and China. Then below that, you have European countries, Western European countries, and Japan and India. Now, while forming these political blocks, what if we've already seen the number 2 and number 3 have clubbed together? United States is picking up all the number 3s and number 4s. So who's left around? India is left alone. It's not part of this grouping or that grouping. And so is France. France has also been very careful in not going into that block. So that means we have to put in extra efforts to maintain the strategic autonomy that we are talking about, that we so cherish. We have to put in efforts. By doing nothing, it won't help us. Like they say, no strategy is the best strategy. That is what is being followed. And it may have helped us in the past, but I don't see it will help us in the future.
But Dr. Giri, when you look at ISRO's major achievements and other things, we have always concentrated on satellite technology, mostly. When we talk about ISRO, we always remember the kind of the usage of satellite technology to study the resources, the fishing, the crop pattern, and all those kind of things. And we have also been helping countries like Bangladesh, Ceylon, and we have been using that kind of, as you said, very soft diplomacy, using the space technologies. Now we are coming to the next stage. Is it possible for India to go in overt and covert alliances with the countries that you said right now, like France, and also Israel? Is it possible for India to create such kind of networks and catch up with what is being happening? Because the kind of scenario that you are putting forth, it shows that if we are going to lose out, we are going to have, this is going to have cascading impacts on various other aspects of our national life, even sovereignty, we may be subservient to this space power. So can we go for such overt and covert alliances with countries?
Yeah.
You think that is happening?
I'll put it in this way. Uh, uh, During the height of colonialism in the late 19th century, there was this famous geostrategist based in the UK. His name was Halford Mackinder. He was a professor of geography, and he put out a theory known as the geographical pivot. And in that theory, he said that the entire region that spans from the European landmass into West Asia, India, Southeast Asia, and Japan, that entire crescent is the global periphery. And that geographic mind uh, deemed Central Asia as the heartland. And he further stated that all those, or any country, or any grouping, or any empire that is able to control Central Asia will control the entire planet. Because through Central Asia, you will be able to get into the Indian Ocean, you'll be able to get into the Pacific, in the Arctic, in the Atlantic. And Central Asia itself is a huge treasure trove of natural resources, from fresh water in Tibet to uh, mineral resources, fuel, natural gas, oil in the Caspian, and all that in Siberia. So that was the mindset. Cut to, in the present sense, I believe that the heartland has moved into the skies. Those who control the skies, those who control the orbit, or I'll go even further, looking at the activities that is happening. Those who control the cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the Moon, will control the entire planet. And this is what is happening. So the coming together of Russia and China, the agglomeration around United States, is for the very same reason. It's a fight, it's a contest for control. Now this control doesn't come in 5 years or 10 years. It does not depend on 5-year plans or the planning commission. These are meta strategic plans. You have to think in the terms of 30 to 50 years at least. 100 is a bit too much, but at least we have to start thinking in what next should we do for the next 30 to 40 years, because 30 to 40 years is a lifespan of one professional. So if we start our careers in our 30s, let's say, very late, your career ends at 60. So you have to think in that way, that what will an entire generation of Indians do to realize this task? Now, again, I go on to say that uh, we have a demographic advantage right now. Our population is young. A substantial part of it is young. I won't go into the percentages, but this substantial young population will grow substantially old in the next 30 to 40 years. So you have this brief window where you can employ your youth for such kind of tasks. And it does not require millions of people. You need to train a few thousands and put them in a well managed uh, uh, professional sector. Now, when I say space has become an economic undertaking, by that I mean that there are still jobs available. In the industry, in the startup sector, in academia. Last year, when Prime Minister Modi announced the space reforms, he took the first step. So he said that, look, we have to engage our youth, and you have to engage the startups that they are creating. But in my reading, and from what I have interacted with the space community in India, I still feel that startups are very vulnerable. Uh, they are yet to support, they have yet to show their proof of concepts and prototypes, and they face dearth of capital. So they cannot accrue domestic capital more than $20 million. And anything that surpasses that ceiling, capital ceiling, will have to go either west to the United States, or it will have to go either to China and Russia for money. By that, what I mean is your startup will eventually be taken over by these two megaliths. These are megaliths. And that's the threat. So what we should do right now is we should have a long-term plan. And once you have a long-term plan, and once countries that find that they share something with India, they share values, they share the same goals, they'll come to you very naturally and organically. So you need not identify, okay, you're my friend, you're my friend, you're my friend. What will happen is they'll come to you. And I hope that stage comes.
Okay, beyond hope, let me ask you this, that how this transformation will happen. We don't see any sign of this transformation happening. In fact, there are space startups are very rare in India. And as you said, where they will find the capital, how there will be actually a stimulation to fund into this.
Okay, so we are right now in an economic position where China was in the 1990s. Let's give it to them. They were smart enough to get all the assistance that they could from the United States. So the biggest benefactor and patron of today's China is actually US and nobody else. We all know that. But when they were a $3 trillion or $4 trillion economy, at that time, their country decided to chalk down a few plans. And these were timely projects. They were supposed to be completed in a time-bound manner. We are not planning that way. The problem with us is, let's say, even with Chinese lunar exploration, in the past 13 years, since 2007, China has gone to the moon 7 times. They're going for the 8th time with countries such as Russia, Italy, United Kingdom, and a few more. And it has established itself as a great lunar power, a great moon power. What have we done? We have gone to the moon only twice, once in a decade, once in the 2010s and once in the 2000s. So Chandrayaan 1 and Chandrayaan 2, the gap between that is 11 years. Now that's not done. So if we go by the same pace, our 7th mission will come in 2070. We've gone to the Mars only once with a puny little spacecraft. And we have no plans in the immediate term to do that. I'll tell you another example or another problem. The more we get embroiled in this COVID crisis, the more we will get away from these meta-strategic projects because our priorities will change. Our priorities will be to solve the immediate crisis. And it's very important to get over crises like these quickly. We can't be procrastinating. So in a period of 3 months that spanned between the first wave of COVID and the second wave of COVID, which began in March, if we assume that way, we had 3 launches from November to February. What did the Chinese and Americans do? Even at the peak of the first wave, they were launching their space missions. The first Dragon capsule launch was in August, and America was reeling under it. Today, we are being cursed and we are being accused of mismanagement in the second wave. Okay, but what has that done? We have put in all our resources. because we want to get over the crisis. But a country like India, with a huge economy, with a huge uh, human resource, we must not be looking in the same direction. The problem is we are like a football team, an under 11 football team, under 14, under 11, that doesn't know how to make formations. We are all running behind the same ball. So right from ISRO to DRDO to all, they have a good heart. They have a good heart. The mind, their heart is in the right place. But again, each of these agencies have their own core priorities, and we should not be forgetting that.
Dr. Giri, in all this comparison, I want to ask one question. See, all said and done, the impressive achievements that China has done is also because it is a country where there is no dissent. And once the core leadership has a vision, they can implement it in a very ruthless manner. And they don't have to worry about the next elections and all that kind of things. The lure of authoritarian, within in single inverted quotes, benevolent dictatorship is really very much in that case. In the case of India, we have a democracy that shows up all the negativities of democracy. For example, as you know, that even to have a neutrino observatory in Tamil Nadu, the kind of anti-science propaganda, in the case of vaccination, the kind of anti-science propaganda that has been going on in the name of democracy and playing all kind of politics with this. There have been, for example, I have seen cartoons when we launched Mangalyaan. I have seen cartoons in Tamil Nadu with the person doing manual scavenging in a pothole and the rocket flying over. He is looking at the rocket flying over. Those kind of cartoons. All these propaganda has been going on, and all this. We have to have democracy. At the same time, we have to compete with a country like China. And we are not like a US kind of an affluent democracy. We are a democracy of a developing nation. In such a situation, what would be the roadmap that you would give for ISRO to compete and come up with this kind of competition in this space colonization race?
During the launch of Chandrayaan 2, a lot of us, including young kids, were wide awake in the middle of the night.
Yes.
They were all glued to TV channels, various TV channels. There were shows. I was part of a few of them, panel shows and discussions, and then there were interviews of scientists. They've all done great. But the best part of it was that we saw that there is a palpable interest in seeing India as a superpower in space. Not a malevolent superpower, but a benevolent superpower in space. And you can see that twinkle in the eyes of the young ones. My only surmise is that we should tap into that. So, and for that, I'm of the opinion that not every kid will be a startup entrepreneur. Some kids are docile. They keep calm. They keep to themselves. They are innovative, but they cannot sell. What about those kids? Do we have enough platforms for them to demonstrate their scientific and technical prowess? Do we have universities with departments of astronomy or astrophysics or space science or space engineering? Has any of the IITs till date participated in any of our space missions? The answer is no. And the reason being that our priorities in the education sector, our priorities in the space agency are very different. Now, coming straight to the point that you made, I feel we need a national space strategy as well as a national space exploration strategy. And that should come directly from the top, the very top. Because until it comes from the top, none of us are going to take it very seriously. When the Americans decided that they wanted to achieve Apollo mission, they wanted to go first to the moon. The decision came from the top. It was Kennedy who announced that they won't budge to the space race. So you need that sort of patronage from the top official. Now, is it merely to demonstrate that you are great or you have the prowess to do that? No. Like I said, there are economic angles to it. For instance, there's this recent market intelligence report done by a company which states that about $42 billion of revenue will be generated by companies that engage in the exploration of the moon. I'm not saying mining of the moon. I'm not saying resource extraction. $42 billion only from building satellites and spacecraft and probes that can travel from here to the moon and operate there. That's where the economic angle comes in. If there is $42 billion of market revenue possible, how much share do we have in there? I don't see any, because there will be at the most 2 Chandrayaan missions in 2020s. The next one is probably in 2023-24. We don't know. Probably the pandemic might push a lot of dates into the future. My thing is, what I am saying is, how can we be so behind? We did well. I agree. We did well in the past 20 years. There's a lot to demonstrate. There's a lot to show. The world has seen what we can do. But we can't live with those past glories. We have to look forward. We have to look into the future. And for that, we will have to look at space as an economic domain. And once we do that, space activities in this country will not be limited to ISRO. Last year's space reforms indicate that when we created a new space agency known as IN-SPACe, Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Why was that? Because we know somewhere down the line that very discrete ministries and agencies like Ministry of Agriculture or Ministry of Mines or Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, they might be of some value in outer space. Tomorrow, if we have to mine the moon, let's say, or mine on an asteroid, won't we involve Ministry of Mines? Tomorrow, if we have to set up a solar power plant on the moon, just to retrieve solar energy to run local operations there, won't we involve Ministry of New and Renewable Energy? Why should we be having a myopic mindset? Why should we be like horses with these 2 flaps on our eyes? And why should we assume that space is only the domain of the Department of Space? Americans don't think it that way. Russians are not thinking it that way. Nor are the Chinese. A socialist country like China is also giving due importance to their education sector, their startup sector. And I'm afraid that we had a brain drain to the West. If we don't do anything, at least in this domain, we'll have a brain drain to China.
That is a very scary thing that you are telling, actually, but it is also a very plausible scenario. So that is what it makes even more scary.
Yeah, the idea is not to scare. The idea is to prepare for any tangible threats. We have to prepare for the worst. And a country like ours, which is touting to be amongst the top 5 economies of the world, do you think the other 4 will be benevolent to us? They'll compete with us. It will be a cutthroat competition and contest in the top 5 economies.
So, Dr. Giri, with all this, from the satellite-based ISRO worldview to the moon exploration, the jump happened with Dr. Murali Manohar Joshi combining with Dr. Kasturi Rangan and announcing the Chandrayaan, envisioning the Chandrayaan, giving the full go ahead. With that, they were able to easily go over to the Chandrayaan this and demonstrate it as a kind of a symbolic technological indicator for ISRO's space capabilities. If you have to give us a similar symbolic thing, like for example, China cultivated, I think, cotton in the darker side of the moon, and they brought back. So it was a symbolically showing and also a very inspiring example of what they can achieve. Similarly, if you want to give a symbolic event that ISRO, with its current capabilities, can achieve and can inspire the entire nation, the generations, what is it that you would suggest?
I think the symbolic event could be Gaganyaan, because you will have faces and people associated with India's first space capsule in that sense. And I'm sure the government will make sure that once these astronauts uh, complete their mission, they will be championing and advocating a more robust human space flight. And that will be enough to really inspire millions of kids and youngsters, because they will see heroes in them, like the way they saw heroes in our space mission managers for Mars Orbiter mission uh, and Chandrayans and what. So they will be another set of heroes. And this new set of heroes won't be ISRO employees. These will be Indian Air Force pilots. So what that will do is it will remove a notion that space is only for engineers, space is only for physicists. People with interest in the armed forces, people with interest in biology, people with interest in medicine, people with interest in law, space law, will all start, diversifying this very narrow domain right now, and that is important. But if I have to suggest five important things to go ahead, I'll suggest these. Number one, my earnest request will be that the Prime Minister of India comes with a national space strategy and a national space exploration strategy. What are we wanting to do? And just to bring make things clearer, countries like UAE, United Arab Emirates, also has a space strategy. A very tiny country like Luxembourg has a space strategy. Why shouldn't India have that? We are amongst the top 5 to 6 great space powers in the world right now. Why shouldn't we be having a strategy? And when you have a strategy, people go through that document again and again, again and again, again and again, and it changes the mindset. You are training, you're conditioning people to take up the tasks, the ambitious tasks that you have laid in the strategy document. That's why it's important. Uh, we've seen that during COVID-19, the first wave, that when the signal from the top came that look, you have to stay at home, you don't have to come out. It was followed very well. It was followed to the T. The same way, it will be followed to the T. So that's number one. Number two, and I'm connecting it with COVID-19 and what we've done. So we have helped with supplies of vaccine to nearly 80 to 90 countries all over the world. So countries from Oceania region, countries into South America, and we have developed a good rapport. Countries now recognize us as a friend, as a dependable ally in dire global circumstances and situations. Can't we leverage this goodwill and relation to set up a deep space communications network around the world? What does it need? We already have a 32-meter antenna in Byalalu, which is close to Bangalore. We need two more. One located in the extreme western hemisphere and one located in the extreme eastern hemisphere. You need 3 antennas located at a distance of 120 degrees from each other. Like I said, we already have one, we just need two. Identify a good friend in South America or North America who will be ready to house your deep space network station, and identify somebody in the Far East. Can't we do that? Once we do that, we are not dependent on Americans anymore. And America doesn't want us to be dependent. Let me also say that, because in the near future, they are planning to have continuous missions going every second year to the moon. They have continuous missions going into deep space, to Saturn's moon Titan in the late 2020s. There are missions going to Mars. So their communication antenna will be occupied for their own civilian missions as well as commercial missions. So before they tell us very bluntly that, look, you have to fend for yourself, let us use vaccine Maitri to create space Maitri. That's my number 2. Number 3, and which is very close to my heart, that now that we have liberalized the education sector, why shouldn't we, at least in the science domain, cut this age-old archaic TCMB blocks in every university, including IITs and ICERs and NITs, central universities, state universities? You have these very rudimentary departments: a department of physics, a department of chemistry, a department of mathematics and biology. Many a times they don't talk to each other. They don't collaborate. Talk to any academician, you'll find that complaint. Instead of departments, you make schools. And you need a school for astronomy, astrophysics, planetary exploration in every other college or every other university in the country. You need that. Because what is the strength of ISRO right now? Must be around 2.5 lakhs at the most, including all the non-technical staff and administration. Is it sufficient? No. You can't be laying the entire responsibility of this meta strategic sector to these 2.5 lakh people. You need more. And if you need them more, if you need more job creators, if you need more skilled professionals, you'll have to create these training capacities in universities. And I'm not telling that make them only in institutes of national importance like IITs or ISO. You have to bring the state universities to a slightly higher level from where they are. And by developing these capacities, it can be easily done. The bright point here is most of the scientists working in ISRO who are doing very well for our country, they do not come from IITs. They usually come from state universities. So rather than getting them migrated from, let's say, Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh or northeast of India, all bringing them all to Bangalore, why not create capacities in all these universities? I'll give you another example for that. There are missions which are being flown by the Americans right now. One mission is known as OSIRIS-REx. The lead agency of that mission is not NASA, although NASA is an important constituent. The lead team of that mission is University of Arizona. Can we imagine an IIT or an ISER or a central university or state university taking up that mantle? A university-led space mission entirely, with a mission control in the university campus, with clean rooms, with laboratories, with all the faculty based there. Let's think of that. There's another similar mission coming, which is known as Dragonfly. Now, this Dragonfly is being supported by Johns Hopkins University. We have to start thinking in that way. That's number three. Number four is get our industries excited. And we need not think of industry and startups as two different entities. Because like I said in earlier, that our startups faced with a dire threat, that beyond $15 million or $20 million, our space startups have no desi native investor. And the only possible investor could be these companies. Now, if the Indian industry houses some of these startups under its own wings, let's say tomorrow an L&T or a Reliance or a Mahindra, you know, uh, open-heartedly brings them together, puts them in their own large campuses, uh, it doesn't harm us at all. Because at the end of the day, you want your startups to remain Indian. You shouldn't be training them for 5 years or 10 years and later on get foreign investors investing their money in it. To a certain extent, yes, you need foreign investments, but not to the extent that a good technology from India becomes non-Indian after a few years. So you have to do that. And number five is that we need continuous narrative support for India's space program. It cannot go down the same rabbit hole once again. For a very long time, our space program was compromised because of socialist tendencies. There were vested interests who were not eager to build sanitary infrastructure in India. Because if the sanitary infrastructure is built out, then you can't say that, look, we have toilets to build. We can't give money to ISRO. And for that reason, you have to have all the basic infrastructure in place so that we move on to the next step. Now, with this administration, I can say that the heart is in the right place, and we've done some fantastic work with Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and other Digital India, in which space has been a big supplier and a major contributor. Then we are building out roads, railways, our electricity penetration, our digital penetration is deepening into the country. But that also means that we have to create new centers. And like I said, state universities, central universities are the places to target. And that will only happen if a positive, a constructive narrative, a positive criticism of the space program is undertaken. You should appreciate what is good, but you should also speak out what is deficient. Because unless and until you give a certain kid all the nutrients that he or she is deficient in, that kid will not grow. So for the betterment of the kid, even if the kid doesn't like drinking a bitter medicine, you have to give that medicine to that kid. ISRO, like any other agency, or the space program, like any other national program of this country, is like that kid. And you have to nurture it. And it's not the responsibility of the government. This is a democratic country. This is our space program. It is the people who will make the space program. The space program might make a few people and their careers, but it is the people who will make the space program. And that's why a greater participation is needed. I am happy that the privatization that has been initiated will do the necessary work. But again, we are only thinking of privatization in a very narrow term. By privatization, we only think of companies and startups. Privatization also means not for profit. Can we bring in some not for profits to come and invest in basic R&D for space or for any other sector? Can we have a scientific philanthropy for space? That is something that needs to be done. And that's my number 5.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chaitanya Giri, for bringing out all this. What is the critical mass for a democracy to achieve the space competitiveness that you have brought out very beautifully, and the deficiencies and the achievements, you have brought out a very balanced view of the whole thing. I wish the persons who are in charge are seeing this and they are taking the right step. So in the conclusion, I just want to show you something very interesting thing that I got from my library. This is actually the Soyuz Apollo mission when they did it, remember? So one of the cosmonaut who participated in it, he was also an artist. And so he made that entire this thing into beautiful pictures, and he got the whole thing like this. And they published it as a children's magazine, and they, this is in Tamil actually. And I have also got the same thing in English. And this was available throughout India. This is the kind of thing that we need to do to make the people get interested. This is in 1977. So still you don't see such publications coming from ISRO or National Book Trust that would reach out to people in such big ways. So what you say, as you rightly said, we need to have a multi-pronged, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, decentralized strategy to achieve the kind of competitiveness that we need, and that has to be done in war footing. Thank you very much for spending your time and answering our questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind.